Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video in my Mira's Finest series. In this video, I'm going to be taking on Pharsis the Ever Queen using Gwin. And as per usual, I'm going to be kind of talking about how Gwin plays as a character both in the team and solo setting, and then kind of talking about the build I personally will be using for this fight. So the first thing to say about Gwin is that no one likes him. Now, to get in how Gwin plays as a character, he doesn't have a whole lot of team support arts. The most he can do for the most part is draw aggro by taunting enemies with Decoy Round, and then tank hits using Defensive Stance. But he does have a decent amount of offensive capability, which is where his strengths lie, and probably what he's best outfitted for. And this makes him pretty good in a solo setting, but I would say that there are better characters than him for a team setting. To kind of get into his arts a little bit, he does have access to a couple of pretty good auras. As I mentioned already, he does have access to Defensive Stance, which is a very good defensive aura if you want to run him either as a tank or just as a defensive aura in general, or it could be a really good aura if you're running a ranged build on him, since he does have a couple of good arts to make use of his ranged attack. Speaking of ranged builds, he does also have access to Gunforce, which is a pretty good aura to have for a ranged build. Though the main DPS arts that will be benefited by this are Grenade Blitz, which is actually a pretty decent art, and Takedown Shot, which is honestly not that great, but it is, you know, it's not the, he doesn't have the worst set of ranged arts to go with Gunforce. And then for his other auras, he has access to Offensive Stance, which is probably the best aura that he has, boosting melee attack and accuracy. And with level 6, it doesn't actually decrease, or with or tier level 6, it doesn't actually decrease your defenses. And he also has access to Medic Free, which I have talked about before. It is slightly gimmicky, but it does have some legitimate uses if you either don't have a ton of resistances, or if you're playing a character where you can stack a lot of HP on them. To kind of get into some of his other arts, he does have some pretty good longsword arts. The main ones that I would recommend using would be Rising Blade, Tornado Blade, and Incendiary Edge for a TP art. He also has access to Ultra Slash, but Ultra Slash really just is not that good of an art in general. As far as buffing arts, all he has is Power Dive, which Supercharge doesn't. It's not the best buff in the world, and the fact that it doesn't have immediate use for the secondary cooldown means that it's not quite as spammable as some other buffing arts, but it is the only buffing art that he has. And for debuffing arts, he has access to Magnum Edge if you don't have Magnum Edge if you want to inflict physical resistance down. And then Flash Grenade and Decoy Round for spammable arts to get TP during Overdrive. Aside from that, he has access to Furious Blast to build Overdrive count. That should really be... Overall, that's about all the arts that are worth mentioning. So let's go ahead and start talking about the build I personally am going to be running for this fight. So you can see my resistances here. I'll go ahead and scroll through my gear really quickly. So I'm going to be going with a build based around using the Galaxy Chief Longsword and using Incendiary Edge for my main DPS, which means that I do want to have relatively high potential, which is why I'm running a double potential dual gun, as well as I want to have 5 Appendage Crushers to bring the appendage hardness down to -5 on all of Pharsis's appendages that are not the horn. Aside from that, the usual night vision to make sure my attacks can actually hit, and I'm just running the Galaxy Chief because it's the highest attack longsword, and there's no real reason on Gwyn in particular to run any other longsword since he does not have access to Core Crusher or anything like that. Popping back over here, so for resistances, you definitely want to... For this build, I'm running pretty low ether resistance, and that is going to come into play later on during the fight, but I'll get into that whenever I get to that. I just wanted to make a note of that now, that only having 25 ether resistance will cause some difficulties a little bit later on. Also worth mentioning now is that of the builds I've showcased in the series, this is probably one of the less it's still a consistent build, but it's one of the harder ones to use effectively because it has a little bit more jank to it. So getting into the arts I'm using on Gwin, I'm going to be running Defensive Stance. This is, other than Medic Free, this is Gwyn's only immediate form of HP recovery, and Medic Free in the context of this build would just be a jankier version of healing, and this build is already not... It already has some problems, and adding Medic Free over Defensive Stance would only make those worse. Power Dive is the only green art that Gwyn has, which will be important for... it'll be an important art for building Overdrive count, as well as the... I'm actually going to be using the evasion during execution of Power Dive throughout the fight to dodge certain important attacks. Decoy Round, it's just a spammable purple art that I can use to boost TP. It also boosts TP more with morale, with morale levels, which is going to make it even better for keeping up TP. Fierce Blast is just a high hit count art that I'm going to use to build Overdrive count. Tornado Blade, Rising Blade, and Incendiary Edge are all just here for DPS, since I'm going to be focusing mainly on an offensive stance longsword build. Then, of course, offensive stance, just a really good, or if you're running a melee build, probably one of the better offensive auras in the game. I don't know if it's necessarily the best, but it is definitely one of the better ones. Then for skills, I'm going to be running Weapon Guard. This will bring it so that when I'm holding my longsword, I will have over 100 physical resistance. Mighty Muscle to boost my melee attack, get me doing a little bit more damage. And then Conflagrant Edge to boost thermal damage. This is, even though I'm running a Gravity Longsword, this will still boost the damage of Incendiary Edge since that forces to being thermal attribute. With all that out of the way though, I think that's about it for the build. I'm going to go ahead and get into the fight. Also, just ignore Celica being in my party. She's just wearing my treasure sensor gear, and I forgot to take her out of the party before the battle started. She'll die pretty quickly probably though, so it doesn't really matter. So that's pretty drum. I'm going to kind of wait for Pharsis to use the lethal tail to exit my skill.
This is a ground gear situation.
I'm going to pop Overdrive pretty quickly. I'm actually going to wait on Power Dive, because I'm going to want to use Power Dive to dodge the topple art. There we go. And Celica's already dead. Getting some good Overdrive count, build up some TP. Go ahead and pop Defensive Stance so I can start getting some recovery and be a little more resilient to the multi-ether laser. I'm going to kind of get into what I was saying earlier about how I'm going to be using Power Dive to dodge some important attacks. So the biggest attack that you really want to be dodging with it is Lethal Tail, and later on in the fight you're going to be wanting to dodge the multi-ether laser with it. Additionally, it can be pretty nice to dodge the topple art with Power Dive as well. I'm not going to have it up in time, so I'm going to just stick on Defensive Stance so that whenever the time bomb kicks in, I will have Defensive Stance to heal me up. Just going to pop it again just to be safe. I'll Power Dive the topple. But basically, especially later on in the fight, the topple can be really dangerous because of the low ether resistance. And that you're going to want to pretty much always be... If you get toppled into the multi-ether laser, that can just kill you on the spot. Because Pharsis does do more damage during phase 3. So because you're pretty much always going to want to make sure you have either Incendiary Edge or Power Dive to block the topple. And you're going to be wanting to use Power Dive to block a combination of the multi-ether laser, the topple, and then the lethal tail. So basically, in general, you're going to want to try and avoid having Incendiary Edge and Power Dive on cooldown at the same time, pretty much starting now in the fight. Because phase 2 will end pretty quickly just simply because the amount of damage this build does.
Decoy round. Decoy round. Rising flame. Let's do this. Overdrive. Getting used.
So yeah, Pharsis should start phase 3 here any second now. Yeah, there's the start of it.
Nail it. Break out those guns.
I'm actually gonna wait here for a sec so I can block the launch here with the incendiary edge. That should do. Something else I didn't mention is that Gwin lacks a cleanse art, so because I'm actually running
Decoy round.
resist gravity resistance down,
Who's with me?
and that's why I'm not running resist topple on this build.
Incendiary edge.
Gonna want to power dive the lethal tail here because time bomb is scary.
Tornado flame.
And at this point in the fight, I'm actually gonna pop defensive stance here, but if you do not have a defensive stance up and you don't power dive it, the multi-ether laser can just outright kill you.
Power dive.
Which is one of the things that is so dangerous about this phase, is that if you get toppled into multi-ether lasers, that can just instantly end the fight.
Offensive stance. Aura up. Now it's your turn.
Which is obviously not ideal. Of course, actually, yeah, she's gonna heal again. Not really a whole lot I could have done about that. I should hopefully be able to get her on the next cycle though. Go ahead and power dive the multi-ether laser. Get some TP back. Block the top with incendiary edge. So hopefully she won't get too aggressive here. I power dived way too early. Doesn't matter though, because she is dead. It's a little bit sloppy there at the end with my finger slipping and hitting the power dive too early, but other than that, a pretty clean fight. Nothing really went wrong during it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I think that's about it for this time. I'll see you guys next time.